Earlier this week on Facebook, yes, I am still on Facebook, I saw a post that stuck with me. Someone I know reposted something from someone I don't know, and perhaps even that person didn't know the original poster. Somehow my circle and the ones that interlock with it managed to produce this particular post in my feed. The original is written by someone named John Perricone, and it goes like this. He writes, "Several years ago, I invited a Buddhist monk to speak to my senior elective class. And quite interestingly, as he entered the room, he didn't say a word. That caught everyone's attention. He just walked up to the board and wrote this: 'Everyone wants to save the world, but no one wants to help mom do the dishes.' We all laughed. But then he went on to say this to my students: 'Statistically, it's highly unlikely that any of you will ever have the opportunity to run into a burning orphanage and rescue an infant. But in the smallest gesture of kindness, a warm smile, holding the door for the person behind you, shoveling the driveway of the elderly person next door, you have committed an act of immeasurable profundity, because to each of us, our life is our universe.'" Now, of course, the factuality of this story is up for debate. And as it happens, the quote about the dishes comes from the 1994 book, All the Trouble in the World, written by the political satirist and humorist P.J. O'Rourke. The thing is, though, as suspect as anecdotes like this are, posted on social media, as apocryphal as this story might be, still there can be truth. And this one struck a chord with me. I suspect that many of us have had moments when we have dreamed of grandeur, of changing the world, of being the one they show videos of in Sunday services generations from now because we so impacted the world. I imagine many of us have longed to have a moment of heroism as we imagine heroism to be, have longed to be more powerful than we perceive ourselves to be in reality. This little story is a reminder of all the ways we are already powerful. We lose sight of that when we look out at the great big world and all its many challenges and pains. We lose sight of it when we lose sight of the interdependent web and our place in it. We lose sight of the truth of our own already existing heroism when we lose sight of the network of mutuality, the garment of destiny spoken of by Martin Luther King Jr. and others. The interdependent web, the network of mutuality, these are not made by the well-known, the megastars, the people we can connect in 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. The networked web of creation is made in tiny circles of love and service and care. Families taking care, friend groups, schools, congregations, towns, overlapping and interconnecting and saving lives and changing universes. Each of us in our own lives, interwoven together with so many others, has the potential already to transform a life. Our own, that of a beloved, that of someone we don't even know, not necessarily through grand gestures and public stands, though those matter, but through everyday small choices about how we act and what we focus on. There is much to read in the work of Adrienne Marie Brown, much of use of worth. We watched a snippet of her earlier. Her work, Emergent Strategy, reminds us that the world is constantly changing, and our most successful living happens when we learn not to fear that change, but to move with it and shape it. The video we watched was from 2017, and though it was born in a particular moment in American political and cultural landscape, it speaks also to our now, as we face with uncertainty the future before us, as individuals in small communities like this one and as a nation. Those uncertainties range from the justice-oriented, will voting rights be beaten back and reproductive justice curtailed? Will the fight against racism and prejudice forever be an uphill battle? Will gun culture ever be reined in, or our competitive culture of violence? They range to the financial. Will the gap between those with vast wealth and the rest of us become wider and wider? Will poor nations around the globe continue to suffer disproportionately? Will our congregation continue to be sustained in traditional ways? Will individuals struggling in our out of control capitalist economy survive more waves of the pandemic? And they range to the social. Will we recover what has already been lost by generations of children affected by gun violence, elitism and exclusion, and now pandemic isolation? Will we recover the motivation we see flagging across nonprofit volunteer groups and other traditional institutions? Will we continue to suffer from the kind of siloing of identities that have kept us apart so long? The uncertainties and the challenges are very real. They are painful. Brown says that sometimes it feels like we can't go on. The overwhelm is real and we have to honor that. But there are other things that are real. And I know I've said this before, but it always bears repeating. Though we live in challenging times that feel unique to us, to live in challenging times is not unique. And though we face an in some ways unprecedented moment in terms of the global scale of this pandemic, in other ways, even that has precedence. In the plague, the Spanish flu, this is a unique moment, but it is not without historical comparison. And it is a moment that in many ways remains an improvement on millennia gone by. Knowing this, we still feel the heartache of the challenges. We still feel concern over what will be. Those reactions are perfectly reasonable. But also, knowing this, we can realize that there are ways forward, that we can, because we have before, instead of fearing this time of uncertainty, help to shape it as Brown recommends. To do that, we have to begin by confronting the feelings we have that make us feel like it is all too much. Often on this Sunday before the day on which we mark the life of Martin Luther King Jr., I think of one particular moment from his story. It's the one that stuck with me the most over all these years. It's late one night after yet another death threat call has been made to the then Reverend King's house. He's 27 with a wife and kids sleeping in nearby rooms, and he's about done. The uncertainty of the future, coupled with the certainty of hatred directed viciously and virulently at him and his family, has King sitting there with his cup of coffee, ready to just stop. In his book, Stride Toward Freedom, he writes, "I was ready to give up. With my cup of coffee sitting untouched before me, I tried to think of a way to move out of the picture without appearing a coward. In this state of exhaustion, when my courage had all but gone, I decided to take my problem to God. With my head in my hands, I bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud. The words I spoke to God that midnight are still vivid in my memory. I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right, but now I am afraid. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone." At that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I had never experienced God before. It seemed as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, "Stand up for justice, stand up for truth, and God will be at your side forever." Almost at once, my fears began to go, my uncertainty disappeared. I was ready to face anything. It's a very human moment that often gets lost amidst the heroism of King's life and eventual martyrdom. How many of us have sat up late, plagued by worry? Worry about our family, our communities, our world, our planet. Sat up, couldn't sleep because very real and present threats to joy and to the future, very real and present uncertainties made it impossible for us to still our minds and bodies long enough to sleep. In my fearful moments like that, in my late nights at the table with untouched coffee, I don't turn to God. It's not really my style. I suppose instead I turn to love made manifest in the world through relationship and community. That's my God. That's my source of hope, my way of remembering that I'm never alone. I think of my beloveds. I think of you all. I think of all the things we build, even in the face of all that is broken. Recently, someone asked me if I was worried about the state of religious life in America and our congregation specifically. I acknowledge that sometimes I worry about turnover in leadership positions. Sometimes I worry about attendance numbers on Sunday, or about what religious education looks like when we have to move online at the drop of a hat. There are times I worry, I said, yes. When we care about something, we're always going to worry about it. When we love something, uncertainty about its future naturally leads to some amount of fretting. For some of us, this is more true than others. The old phrase worrywart comes to mind as a way to describe some of us. But here's the thing, and I said this to my then interlocutor, I worry about this community we share, but I am not worried about it as a matter of course. There have been times I was, for months, just implacably worried, sure, but not right now. Right now, I feel optimism, hope, a renewed commitment to the fundamentals of the work we do here because, and this is what I told the board in a recent meeting, because what happens in small communities, what happens right here between us really matters. Over the last 2 weeks, perhaps because of New Year's and how it makes us take stock, perhaps because of this newly peaking wave, I've received communications from a number of you that have reminded me what congregational life is for, what it's all about. I've heard you say that the way we talk about authentic, whole self living here has you actively embracing that in your life outside. And that adult education we have offered has armed you with tools for welcoming and supporting others, tools you didn't have before. I've heard you say that the Sunday morning routine of being present here together online has been an anchor to the uncertainty of the pandemic. And that the ways you've been heard and seen and known here have you seeking that kind of empowerment and respect in other parts of your lives. I've heard you say that the connection and vulnerability of relationships built here has changed your sense of what is possible in mutual care. It sounds melodramatic, perhaps, but the business we are in this congregation is the changing and even saving of lives. And the reality is, though we don't always realize it, because we don't always share this truth with each other when it happens, this congregation is doing just that for so many. All throughout massive changes and challenges, we have been here so that all of us could show up in all the ways we have. And I will tell you a truth I know about congregational life. The more you show up, the more you lean into community, the more it becomes a cornerstone of your living. And the more you are able to open yourself to change. And then all of a sudden, all sorts of possibilities emerge. And things get better. So I am optimistic because you are here, still here, week after week, email after email, meeting after meeting. You're here opening your minds and hearts and allowing your life to deepen, allowing yourself to become more yourself. I'm optimistic because of this, because of you. King sat there and he prayed to his God and he found the assurance that he would never be alone. And I hear that same assurance in every message of care you offer each other, every time one of you reaches out to tell me about a fellow congregant in trouble, every Sunday when I see your names pop on the screen, or I see your eyes smile above your mask. Small communities of care matter. They are what change everything. Small circles, doing the dishes, positive impacts in our local, intersecting, overlapping communities. Brown understands that governments come and go, and yes, their work matters, and we need to impact it, affect it. We need to make sure we don't go down in a blazing tyrannical dictatorship or a death-dealing blaze of capitalist greed. But each and every day, activists, community members, family members are making changes, embracing the world and offering help that shifts universes and that improves lives. The little, small, unsung acts of heroism can save a life and change everything. And these stories are stories worth telling. These stories are stories to be proud of. Most of us will never be a King or a Brown. Our words and deeds will live on only in the small circles we are a part of. And that is not a thing about which to be ashamed or to feel wistful. That is the truth of most human living, and it is powerful beyond what our current culture teaches us. We exist in an intricate web, the beauty of which only shines because of each thread, nearly barely perceptible when seen all together. That weaving is made more nuanced and layered exactly because each strand brings greater depth to the oneness. The gorgeously woven blanket of creation, circle upon circle, layer upon layer, generation after generation, is not just beautiful, it's of use. It's a source of warmth, comfort, sustenance, love, and it is right here with each breath and each word and each act we add to it. May we continue to be woven in and among the communities that matter to us, taking lessons from the masters of the past, shedding our imaginings of grandeur, and slowly but surely weaving more warmth and greater love into the world, aware that the thread we leave behind adds more than we can ever know. So may it be.